Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Big Mike Sports, Atlanta-born, Carolina-raised, Detroit-driven. I'm your host, as always, Big Mike.
The one and only. Yeah, I'm back.
And it was a pretty nuts weekend in the Big Mike Sports extended universe, as we had Georgia Tech upset UNC to send their season down in the dumps even further. We had App State fending off an upset attempt on homecoming weekend against Southern Miss, a one-win team on the season. But first, our leading story of the day is that it finally happened, just as we thought it might. Yes, the previously winless Carolina Panthers dropped one on the now 3-4 Houston Texans, who also dropped to 1-3 on the road this season in a 15-13 victory for the Panthers, who now extend their home record to a glorious 1-2. It was a pretty tough game. Of course, for the Panthers to be able to win, you got to send the game back at least 60, 70 years perhaps. I don't know, it was pretty bad look, especially for the Texans. C.J. Stroud going 16-24, pretty respectable completion percentage. However, only 140 yards, less than 6 yards per attempt. Got sacked twice, and there's a little bit of running game for the Texans, as leading rusher Dameon Pierce was able to put up 46 yards, just under 4 yards a carry. Devin Singletary adding 30 more on 10 rushes. For a team that ran the ball so much in this game, as the Texans did, 30 rushing attempts versus only 24 passing attempts, they didn't really seem to do a whole lot with it. Of course, they held a lead for most of the game up until the very end. But the time possession, they actually lost the time possession. 29 minutes 30 seconds for the Texans as opposed to 30 and 30 seconds for the Panthers. So still pretty close on the time possession, but you would think that a team that ran the ball as much as the Texans did would have had a little bit more time possession, as the Panthers only ran it 24 times as opposed to 31 passing attempts. And in those 24 rushing attempts, they only got 44 yards. Long rush of 8 on the day for the Panthers. So I don't know how they were able to hold on to the ball like they did. I guess that short passing game was just enough to help them be able to hang on to the ball there. Bryce Young, 22 of 31, 235 yards and a touchdown, 7.6 yards per attempt passing. He did end up taking 6 sacks for a loss of 55 yards, which is pretty gnarly if you're the Panthers. The Panthers did everything you'd expect them to cause them to lose, except for, I guess, forcing the one turnover on the Texans. That was probably what changed the game. The Texans running the ball with their fullback and fumbling it to turn the ball over. Pretty rough coaching decision there, if you ask me. I guess it was just kind of a rough coaching day for the Texans, as nothing they really did seemed to work a whole lot. Not a whole lot of success in either phase of the game on offense. Noah Brown, your leading receiver for the Texans, 3 catches, 57 yards. Not exactly what you want. Another sort of quiet day for Nico Collins, only 4 receptions for 30 yards. And then on the receiving end for Carolina, Adam Thielen extending his run of dominance and as, I guess, one of the best slot receivers in the NFL right now. He's got a lot of catches so far. Not going for a whole lot of yards, but, still raking in those catches. If you have him in PPR, I believe he is a top 3 receiver in PPR fantasy. But anyway, 8 receptions, 72 yards on the day, good for 9-yard average. He did have a long reception of 31 yards, so I guess if you take that away, that's 7 receptions for 41 yards, catching it maybe 5 or 6 yards down the field and going down immediately, I guess. 11 targets, 8 catches, pretty standard day for Thielen, helping the Panthers get some chunk plays there. Jonathan Mingo showing up in the scorecard just a little bit, but good enough to make an impact on the game. 4 receptions for 62 yards, good for a 15.5-yard average per reception, and a long reception of 40 yards. Good to see him get involved. Really want to see Mingo, the young rookie receiver, start to kind of stretch the field and get some more run. And the Panthers definitely need it. They need somebody other than Thielen to step up. Chark, he had a few targets as well, but only 2 catches on the day. Still kind of a non-factor. I think that he had 1 target that was pretty far down the field, but the throw was not able to be completed. So still a work in progress with the new play caller, Thomas Brown. But you got to like what you see so far, because winning is what matters, and they were able to put up a win on this one. They did open up the field a little bit more, throwing it down the field, just a little bit more, kind of trying it out a little bit, kind of, trying to open up the offense a little bit, which I think is exactly what Bryce Young needs. So if they're able to continue to do that and get even better results as they keep going, this could be 4 or 5 win team down the stretch, especially in this run of games that will continue the next couple weeks, as we have spoken about on the previous episodes, how they have games against the Colts and the Bears coming up. So maybe a little win streak for the Panthers. Who knows? If you can win ugly like this, that is what good teams eventually do. Not that this is a good team in any respect, but still, reassuring. Exactly what we kind of predicted what would happen. We didn't want to put our foot down and say that this was the game that they would win, but we knew that it would be very important for Bryce Young to have a good performance. And hats off to him. He outdueled C.J. Stroud. The Panthers defense was able to hold Stroud to be almost a non-factor in this game after he's been on such a statistical tear this early in the season. So yeah, really good sign for Carolina there, as their rookie quarterback is able to outshine the guy who some people thought they maybe should have drafted instead of Bryce Young. Even a lot of the coaching staff on the Panthers were pretty set on Stroud before David Tepper, the owner, eventually said we need to go for Bryce Young. So good to see it work out for them. Always good to have a win. And good feels for the Panthers right now. Not something you can say often this season, but good start. Yeah! Moving on to the college game, we had a pretty nifty upset to cap off the college football Saturday, with Georgia Tech being able to knock off UNC in pretty improbable fashion, 46-42. Georgia Tech able to make a huge game out of it in the fourth quarter and end up kind of running away with it at the end. They went into the fourth quarter down 35-24, UNC leading, extending the lead after a Drake May 14-yard touchdown run. But then Georgia Tech started to kind of keep the game close, scoring a touchdown and getting the 2-point conversion to make it 35-32. It seemed at this point that Georgia Tech might be able to hang in there a little bit, but it didn't really seem like they were going to be able to get the job done, take the lead and everything, especially after UNC scored once more, only less than a minute after Georgia Tech scored to make it 35-32. UNC with a huge pass from Drake May to make it 42-32. It just seemed like that was going to be how it was going to end up. Georgia Tech might be able to keep it close, but in the end not be able to top UNC at the end, until Georgia Tech somehow did exactly that with a 70-yard touchdown run to get ever closer, 42-39. And then with under 5 minutes left to go, a 5-yard pass from Haynes King to make it 42-46. There's also a pretty key Haynes King interception somewhere in there that made it seem like Georgia Tech was not going to be able to win the game. Really, really bad timing for the interception. But somehow the Yellow Jackets were able to overcome all of these things and win in really improbable fashion. 577 yards for UNC versus 635 for Georgia Tech. It was one of those UNC-Georgia Tech games. It's always interesting when these two teams get together. The past, I think it's 16 out of 20. I don't know, you'll have to verify that for me, but Georgia Tech has been able to beat UNC a lot in recent history. Of course, when Georgia Tech loses against UNC, they tend to lose pretty big, but in this case, they were able to hang in there against them. And up until the very end, until they were able to get the game-winning shot that they needed to be able to win. Another improbable win for Georgia Tech joins a small little series of them this season, the most notable being the victory against Miami. And they also sprinkle in some really bad losses against some what you would assume would be inferior competition, especially with some of the wins that Georgia Tech has this year. Big losses to Bowling Green and Boston College. Really, really weird. Really weird how this Georgia Tech team is super inconsistent. I don't know if it's because maybe the team is a little on the younger side or something like that. They just haven't been in the Coach Key's program enough to kind of, do it regularly. I don't know, but it's a good sign for the team at the very least that they're able to get a couple pretty big wins against ranked opponents every season. All you need to do now, going into next season, is beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. And then in the end, you might find that this Georgia Tech team is pretty good. But right now, not quite there yet, unfortunately. Although they do move up to 3-2 in the conference, tied with the Tar Heels now. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. So yeah, I don't think either of these teams are really in ACC contention anymore. If Georgia Tech had defeated Boston College and then won this game, there would be some kind of sneaky Georgia Tech ACC championship implications that we would have to look forward to. But unfortunately, the team is not quite there yet, can't quite win the games that they have to. So we just get these kind of consolation prizes every few weeks or so with a big win against a ranked opponent for Georgia Tech. But yeah, it just seems like they used some sort of like magic or something like that because this game should have been put away, honestly. Especially considering how the UNC offense was running. Like a pretty decent day from Drake May, all things considered. He didn't really open the game with very many passing attempts. Towards the end, he had that one long touchdown pass that kind of aided his numbers a little bit. 17 to 25, 310 yards, 2 touchdowns. But I think that the reason he didn't get very many passing attempts is because Omarion Hampton was kind of going off. 153 yards on 29 carries and 2 touchdowns. I mean, if you just ride that guy, you would win more times than not. But the UNC defense gave up some big runs of their own against the Georgia Tech rushing attack. It just seems like this was kind of a game of explosive plays. Both teams kind of trading them back and forth. Georgia Tech being the one who made the last big plays, I guess, to win. So yeah, really interesting game. And when these two teams get together, it can get pretty crazy. It wasn't quite the ACC record. I think it was like 62 to 50 or something like that. Game that happened several years ago by now. But it kind of looked like it was going to get to that point. But oh yeah, another interesting fact here. Georgia Tech was down 14-0 in the first quarter, but then both teams scored 38 points in the second quarter, 14 for UNC and 24 for Georgia Tech. And capping the game off for Georgia Tech was 22 fourth quarter points. So, yeah, huge fourth quarter run, big swings for Georgia Tech when they needed them. And yeah, they come out with a victory here. Will they be able to finish out the season strong and get, maybe a decent bowl? Maybe like 7-5 record? Who knows? But yeah, really reassuring stuff from Georgia Tech. Hopefully they'll be able to use the momentum here to keep it going. And if you're UNC, you're kind of wondering where to go from here. Of course, basketball season starts soon, so maybe everybody's just going to forget about the football team. Maybe they'll have another kind of 8-4 type season and get to decent bowl. I don't know. It's just kind of a big bummer for UNC to have their season go down the tank like this in such quick fashion. But hey, in the ACC, that kind of thing can happen. A couple tough losses versus conference opponents will bury you. So Florida State better watch out. Louisville's still up there, and somehow Virginia Tech is up there at 3-1 in the conference. So conference still up for grabs. Very interesting year in the conference, the ACC conference this year, to say the least. But yeah, Georgia Tech and UNC most likely out of it now, but you can never be too sure. So Florida State better continue playing really well if they want to hang on to their season and their college football playoff aspirations.
To this day!
Speaking of wacky college football upsets on Saturday, it looked like that's where this one was going for App State's homecoming weekend against the one-win Southern Miss Golden Eagles, featuring Frank Gore Jr., who did indeed go off against that App State defense. 24 carries, 247 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I don't understand how you can get 10 yards per carry with your running back and lose a game, but Southern Miss was somehow able to do just that. I guess they got away from him late or something. I don't know, but it looked like Southern Miss was going to win this game all the way through. They held a pretty serious halftime lead and really dominated a really big portion of the game. With 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter, Southern Miss went up 38-28 on App State and had an 83.7% chance to win. But for whatever reason, right after that moment, App State decided it was going to be their game as they rattled off 20 straight points to pull off a pretty insane 48-38 victory at home. Apparently, this is just how App State's going to be now. They cannot win easily. They have to have these improbable wins against much inferior competition. reminded of either last week or a couple weeks ago, whenever they played UL Monroe. That's another team just like Southern Miss who is 0-5 in the conference this season. To have to beat a team like UL Monroe at the last second, to be really lucky to do so also doesn't necessarily bode well for the confidence of the program. I mean, it's good that they won this one. Wanted them to win in much more convincing fashion considering they were at home during homecoming weekend. But being able to rattle this one off in the win column, despite everything, kind of makes you breathe a little sigh of relief, I guess, especially when considering the alternative that they could have very easily lost this game if they didn't somehow turn it around at the very end. Southern Miss owned time of possession, owned the first down battle, won the turnover battle, and they did gain App State in total yards as well. I guess it was just everything going right for App State in that fourth quarter, being able to give them the chance to put that game away. The whole game rested on Joey Aguilar there. 391 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have an interception and a fumble, but he was able to do what he had to do to win the game. And then Kanye Roberts also had a huge 60-yard touchdown run that really helped out the cause for App State as well. So yeah, just these kind of really important moments fell App State's way somehow, some way, and was able to give them the win in this one. A much needed win also because we talked about previously the kind of gauntlet that App State's going to have to run in November with games against teams such as Marshall, James Madison, and Georgia Southern, and Georgia State. Now, I don't think App State's lost to Georgia State yet, while both teams have been up in the FBS. But this will be a tough Georgia State team, one that has a better record than App State, and you will have to be in their stadium to play them as well. So potentially tough game, one that they could very well lose. And then, of the other teams are teams that App State has had trouble with in the past. James Madison, Georgia Southern, Marshall, all teams that could very easily beat us. However, the Marshall game doesn't look quite as bad because Coastal Carolina completely destroyed Marshall in their recent matchup. So perhaps Marshall not quite the team that they used to be. I mean, they definitely weren't earlier in the season, but that defense was still pretty good, although the offense needed some work. But if the defense is vulnerable now, maybe App State could get a win there, which would be much needed, and perhaps use that for some momentum going into that Georgia State game. If they could win those two games, that would put them into bowl eligibility. I don't really see them beating James Madison at all, although anything is possible, especially as far as App State's team is concerned, considering some of the wins that they've had this season. And also Georgia Southern, perhaps this could be the kind of year that they're able to beat Georgia Southern. They definitely can't ever beat Georgia Southern when App State is having a good season. So maybe they'll make up for it with this one, kind of unexpected win. Definitely not the peak of this App State team. If this is the Aguilar era, it's just beginning. He's still really talented. Just, some issues with consistency, and he still makes mistakes every now and then, as all freshmen do. But the next 2 or 3 years, if they're able to build the defense, especially, the defense hasn't been very good this season. If they're able to build up on the defense, perhaps give Aguilar some weapons, and Sean Clark keeps his job, it could be really good for App State. Maybe we could get back up into the double-digit win type seasons in the next 2 or 3 years. Could be tough getting there. Could be a long road, but could be worth it in the end, especially if they can get back into that kind of big New Year's Six bowl relevancy. In 2019, they had a shot at the Cotton Bowl. I'm pretty sure that's the big at-large bid for bowl games for a group of, just whoever is good, whoever they want to throw in there. But until they lost to Georgia Southern at home. What else is new? So this gives us, I guess, a little bit. I mean, it doesn't feel good because this is one that they should win easily. They had to rattle off a win at the end, but I guess that's just how we're doing it now. I guess that's just App State football right now. So feel good for the win. Not necessarily the best way to do it, but, maybe having that little extra blood pumping through you, with that adrenaline and everything. Maybe that's what'll get you going to win some of these other games. Knowing that no matter what happens, you can still pull out a victory. That does have some value, but we're definitely looking at a glass half full. But what else can you do? Hopefully the team doesn't disappoint down that stretch run.
It seems to me like you're the expert.
And last but certainly not least, the Lions hit the gridiron in primetime once again, where they are undefeated this season in primetime as they take on the Raiders at home here on Monday Night Football. The Lions been huge favorites all week. The Raiders opened as 4.5-point underdogs. That got bet up to 8 at one point. Now it's about 7.5 in favor of the Lions. Hopefully the Lions will cover there and make it another one of those 2-possession victories, especially against a team like this, the Raiders, who are a couple possessions away from potentially being an 0-7 team. They had some really close wins against the Packers and the Patriots, where they really needed a lot to go their way in order to win those games. Not the greatest quarterbacks they were facing in those ones either. It'll make it a little bit more difficult for the Lions, however, with workhorse back David Montgomery being out once again, along with starting guard Jonah Jackson and starting center, Pro Bowl center, Frank Ragnow being doubtful with his continuing toe injury, kind of chronic thing that they can't surgically repair anymore, along with a little calf issue to go with it. And then a surprise addition to the injury report this weekend, Amon-Ra St. Brown being listed as questionable with an illness. The real engine of the Lions offense, while Montgomery has been out in that previous game against the Ravens. 19 targets for Amon-Ra St. Brown, converted that into 12 receptions, over 100 yards once again in that game. So him being out of the game could potentially be pretty huge for this Lions offense, already missing Montgomery. Of course, Gibbs had a little coming out party last week with putting up some pretty huge numbers in garbage time mostly. But they also got some guys like Laporta that they can depend on pretty regularly. Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds doing their part when called upon and really excelling in certain respects. Jameson Williams could also get a little bit more, a few more targets in this one. Him and Jared Goff still have yet to be 100% on the same page. But, the threat's always there for J-Mo to take, any sort of pass and turn it into a 60-yard touchdown pass. So not the end of the world if Amon-Ra St. Brown can't go. Even if he can go, they expect him to be pretty limited because it's unclear what kind of illness he has. But if we can just assume that it's something like flu-like symptoms, maybe like a really bad cold, something along those lines, he definitely wouldn't be at 100%. I think any of us who have been in that condition know the kind of like brain fog that it can put you in. So, when he's out there, not saying that Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't focused and a competitor. He's one of the most focused people that there is. But if you're in that condition and you have kind of brain fog, maybe you drop a pass that you wouldn't normally drop or something like that. So, definitely need some other people to step up. Really looking forward to this potentially being another huge Jahmyr Gibbs game as he finally comes out into being the kind of star player that we all think he can be, especially against this Raiders defense, which has a pretty good passing defense for the most part, giving up under 200 yards per game to opposing offenses. However, you could say that they haven't faced very many quality offenses, and when they do, they tend to lose in those games. They dropped a game at Buffalo, 38-10, one of the better offenses that they faced this season. Then they also lost 24-17 to the Chargers, probably the second best offense they've faced so far this season. The Lions offense definitely comparable to either one of those teams in terms of being one of the best. I don't quite want to say that the Lions have somebody in the same vein as Stephon Diggs. They got guys who could one day get up there. I don't think they would be quite as productive in the same way as Diggs, who's been going on a tear at certain points this season. Amon-Ra St. Brown, not exactly the same type of receiver. Jameson Williams, you could say, has that kind of deep threat ability, but it remains to be seen whether that will ever be consistent or not. The Lions definitely have a better run game than the Buffalo Bills, I would say. But yeah, it would be nice if this game could be like a 38-10 type of win for the Lions. We'll just have to see what happens, of course. But the Raiders' rushing offense, not very good at all, under 70 yards per game on offense for them. and they have to go against the Lions rushing defense, which is one of the best in the NFL. Gives up maybe even fewer than those 68 yards per game that the Raiders offense gets. So yeah, it's really going to come down to Jimmy G and what he can do. Of course, this hasn't been the greatest season for Jimmy G. Pretty sure he has more interceptions than touchdowns at this point, and he'll also be coming off of an injury this week as well. Still trying to recover there. So yeah, this could potentially get pretty bad for the Raiders offense. Of course, they have weapons at receiver that you can't ever ignore. And Devontae Adams, still one of the better receivers in the NFL, along with Jacoby Myers, who has also had some pretty big games so far this season. So yeah, definitely a team they still got to watch out for. However, with the rushing offense being the way that it is, going against this kind of rushing defense, and with Jimmy G being in the condition that he's in, while the Lions do give up, I think, an above average amount of passing yards, although that is pretty skewed from last week's performance. But they can turn you over and get pressure in certain games so far this season. So it could be another interception or two for Jimmy G in this game. So that could be a pretty big swing for the Lions there. But yeah, if you get stuck in a game of attrition that the Raiders sometimes get you into, like this game cannot be 21-17. This game cannot be 17-13 like those Raiders victories that happened earlier in the season. You got to go pedal to the metal if you're the Lions. You got to, be executing in every facet of the game. Get off to a hot start immediately, and don't let these guys play to your level. I mean, we know who the better team is. It's just a matter of playing like it at this point. So hopefully this will be a really nice get-back game for the Lions after that god-awful performance last week. This should be an opponent that they roll over. So we're hoping that the Lions follow through on their end of the bargain there.
Nice shot!
I don't know if I'm going to be putting on this headset again.
Thank you for sticking with us once again. We'll cover how the Lions ended up doing in this game against the Raiders. Hopefully it'll be a very jovial experience, and we'll be able to return from a blowout happening for the Lions there in Detroit. But we'll see. Anything can happen. It was a wild weekend with some pretty wild upsets on Saturday. So we will continue with our cautious optimism as usual and hope to see you there next time.